The nation of Israel became a nation when we stood at Har Sinai and accepted the Torah. And we said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will learn. And I want to talk about the levels of consciousness because there is a level of consciousness called Israel. So I want to explain a little bit about this and how we should look at ourselves as Jews, understand the purpose of that reality in our reality. Why are we Jews? What does it mean to be the nation of Israel? What is the nation of Israel? So there are different levels of consciousness or existence in creation. These levels reflect both physical and spiritual realities, from the simplest form being to the highest form. So first, let's just define reality according to the Jewish sources. It's 5-dimensional. 3 are physical, 1 is spiritual, and 1 is time. And we're saying the levels of consciousness have a physical reality and also a spiritual reality. Everything's connected, by the way. So the simplest form of consciousness is domem, mineral, the inanimate, non-conscious realm. Tzomeach is plant, the vegetative realm with a limited life and growth. Chai is an animal, the animated sentient beings capable of movement and instinct. Medaber, speaker, human beings distinguished by speech, intellect, and higher faculties. Yisrael, a spiritual level of consciousness rooted in covenant with God and the pursuit of divine wisdom. The information given to us in the Torah. King Solomon tells us what the purpose of life is, and he offers profound perspective on the human existence. In Proverbs 9:10, he writes, "The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God." And similarly, in Kohelet, he concludes that the end of the matter, when all is heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole of man. These verses suggest that the essence of a human being, and more so, the purpose of Israel, the purpose of the nation of Israel, lies not only in intellectual achievement, but in moral and spiritual discipline. According to Rabbi Akiva in Mishneh Avot 3:18, beloved is man, for he was created in the image of God. Beloved are Israel, for they are called his children. This hints that Israel as a status involves a divine mission, beyond mere human existence. Now, the Talmud and the Kabbalistic literature describe the progression of consciousness as a movement from mere existence to intentional, God-centered awareness. Domem, the mineral, represents the most basic level of existence, inanimate objects. While seemingly lifeless, minerals serve as a foundation for higher life forms. King Solomon's teaching that without a fear of God, one is more useless than a mineral. This reflects the idea that life without purpose is as much use to one's spiritual advancement as if he would have been born with less consciousness than a mineral. Now, the fact is that a Jew is born with the potential to be Israel. And yet, if we don't explore, if we don't look for the wisdom, this is a big fisfus, a big loss, because you had the potential to be Israel, and instead you were more useless, says King Solomon, than a mineral. Tzomeach, plant. The plant level demonstrates growth, but without conscious awareness or will. This stage symbolizes life that follows instinctive patterns, but lacks individual self-direction or a higher purpose. Chai, animal. Animals have movement and instinct, experiencing emotions and sensory perceptions. However, they remain driven by impulse and lack higher intellect and moral reflection. An individual at the chai level may possess desires and instincts, but lacks a deeper spiritual aspiration. Medaber, speaker. This level refers to humanity. whose distinguishing trait in speech, medaber. Speech reflects thought, reason, and creativity. While every human is a medaber by nature, what differentiates between medaber chai, a speaking animal, and a medaber on the path to becoming Yisrael, a higher level of consciousness, is how speech and intellect are used. Without the Torah and the moral development, a person may remain at the level of chai medaber, a person dominated by instinct whose intellect serves selfish needs. Yisrael, the highest level of consciousness. Yisrael, that's the level that Yaakov Avinu obtained, Yisrael, and from him came the 12 tribes. And eventually the nation of Israel, that we have the potential to reach this level of consciousness. Yisrael represents an awareness that transcends mere intellect, aiming towards the divine. According to Talmud, in Shabbat 31a, the essence of Torah observance is built on two pillars, love of God and fear of God. Attaining the status of Israel requires discipline, which involves both intellectual engagement with the Torah and the transformation of one's character. This level demands intentional use of speech and reason, aligning one's life with the divine will. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute. Okay, Rambam, in his Guide for the Perplexed, in 3:54, explains that the highest purpose of the intellect is to know God and to serve God. Intellectual development alone, without the discipline and without fear of God, leaves a person short of true spiritual achievement. The journey from medaber to Yisrael requires both study and action. According to Pirkei Avot in 1:17, it is not the study that is the main thing, but the doing. Spiritual growth depends not just on learning Torah, but also on refining one's character. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari, Book 1, sections 95 and 96, explain that Yisrael, the Israel, is not merely an ethnic designation, but a spiritual ideal. He writes that a Jew who neglects the Torah and divine commandments is no different from any other person. He falls to the level of chai medaber, who happens to have a Jewish lineage, but lacks the essence of Israel. Now, Israel, Jews, we say every Shabbat, at the end of every Shabbat, we do Havdalah. Excuse me. We do, because we're supposed to mark the difference between holy and unholy. We're supposed to mark the difference between the nation of Israel and all of the other nations. We're not just like every other nation. We were taken outside. We were made separate. We have a different goal in life. Our very goal in life is actually to achieve this level of consciousness, this state of spiritual awareness, where we both fear God and we love God. And this, says King David in Tehileem, is the most profound feeling of joy and happiness and fulfillment that you could have, is to have a closeness to Hashem. And as we know, King Solomon in all his wisdom said that this is the very essence, the very purpose of your life, is to obtain a fear of God. Now, secular Judaism, it risks reducing the Jew to the level of chai medaber. If you separate the Torah discipline and the observance of the Torah and the commandments and the fear of God, speech and intellect may be used for material purposes only, making one no different from any other intelligent being. You fall simply to the physical. We have neglected the spiritual in a lot of cases. The spiritual information is in the Torah, and that is why we are the nation of Israel. The sages in the Talmud emphasize that Israel must aspire to live by divine values. In the Sanhedrin 99a, it teaches that one who denies the Torah denies his own life, indicating that the absence of Torah leaves one spiritually disconnected from the source of true vitality, excuse me, which is God. I've explained in some of my other videos that every Jew has a holy Jewish soul given by God. This soul, that's part of our spiritual dimension, okay? So we have a body that's physical. The soul inside your body is what is animating you for whatever amount of time that you have in your life. And this soul is connected to God, and this soul is connected to the nation of Israel. But you can do things in your life that sever this connection. And so, first of all, we have to be aware that there is a soul. First of all, we have to be aware that there is the spiritual dimension of our universe. We have to be aware that there is a reason and a purpose to our life, and there is a reason and a purpose for the nation of Israel in our reality, and it is not to be the 71st nation like all the other 70 nations. No, there is a mavdil. There is a difference, and we're supposed to recognize and know that difference between holy and unholy, between the nation of Israel and all of the other nations. Okay, so we have to first be aware that there's a spiritual element to our reality, a dimension. We have to be aware that our soul, what our soul is and what that information is. And then we have to know that when we do not connect to this, and when we are not connecting the way that we live our life to the spiritual information that is given in the Torah and in the laws of the Torah, which we are supposed to follow, and we're supposed to make the way we live our life, our behaviors, and our personalities. And as Rabbi Avigdor Miller said, and I did a different class on that, we're supposed to obtain one mind, a different mind, not the mind of our ego and our wants and our desires and our emotions, but rather to align our personalities, ourselves, the way we live, our characters to this wisdom and this information, what God wants, what God expects from us, which is to obtain this level of consciousness called Israel. Okay, so secular Judaism, which tells us, disconnects us from the Torah laws and said we are Jews because we're Jews. Let's eat, let's celebrate, let's be traditional, let's do whatever we want, and severs this bond, therefore reducing or risking the fact that you could now, with this potential, become a highest level of consciousness, to fall down, chas v'shalom, to be an animal that can speak. Okay? So let's go and discover the differences between medaber chai and chai medaber. The distinction between both of these is subtle, yet profound. A medaber chai is one whose speech is infused with life, used to convey wisdom, morality, and divine truth. In contrast, a chai medaber speaks but remains ruled by instinct and self-interest. Now, to reach this level of Israel, one must adopt not only the intellect, but also the moral discipline and fear of God. This spiritual consciousness is the ultimate goal of human existence, according to the Torah. So, achieving this level, is a lifelong endeavor. In Jewish thought, chokhmah, which is wisdom, is the spark of inspiration or raw knowledge, the initial idea. Binah is understanding, which takes that raw knowledge and develops it, breaking it down into deeper insights and meaningful connections. Da'at, knowledge, it's the ability to internalize and apply these insights in practical life, creating a unified understanding. Well, all three are essential. We're going to talk about Binah. This is the focus because it involves expanding analyzing and refining ideas which help us to connect the intellectual concepts to emotional and spiritual growth. Bina allows us to integrate what we've learned into how we feel, behave, and relate to God, turning abstract knowledge into lived experience. Now, the transition from the basic level of medaber, speaker, to Israel depends on this development of Bina, the key faculty in Jewish thought. While speech distinguishes humans from other creatures, how speech is used determines whether one will merely be a chai medaber, a speaking animal, or ascend towards the spiritual consciousness of Israel. Bina serves as this bridge between these two states, transforming speech from a tool for the mundane expression into a means of divine communication and wisdom. Now, this Bina involves processing knowledge, like we said, and applying it in meaningful ways. The sages teach the Bina is more than intellectual comprehension. It includes the ability to internalize knowledge and act upon it, as we have stated. And this is in Talmud Brachot 33a. If there is no wisdom, there is no understanding. And if there is no understanding, there is no wisdom, which suggests a link between these two things: wisdom and understanding. So it allows a person to discern between right and wrong, between truth and illusion, and to express this understanding through proper speech and behavior. While speech, dibur, medaber, dibur, is an innate ability for all humans, meaningful speech requires bina. Simple verbal expression can convey thoughts or emotions, but speech that reflects wisdom and divine truths demand a higher level of understanding. This is emphasized by King Solomon in Proverbs 18:21. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Speech without bina can lead to confusion, harm, or selfish expression, reflecting the lower state of chai medaber. However, speech guided by bina allows one to engage with wisdom, communicate divine truths, and participate in the sacred mission of Israel. The Talmud in Shabbat 31a teaches that the essence of Torah rests on the ability to speak and live truthfully. Now, this may be a good time to interject and say that we don't all have our own individual truths. There is actually an objective reality and an objective truth. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind when we're talking about truth. So what is hateful to you, says the Talmud in Shabbat 31a, do not do it to your fellow. This is the whole Torah and the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Learning and understanding Torah involve the proper use of bina, which allows one to express Torah's principles in speech and action. Attaining the level of consciousness Israel requires more than mere speech or knowledge. It involves internalizing divine wisdom through bina so that speech will reflect not only human intellect, but also moral discipline and a connection with God's will. The Sefer Yetzirah in 1:3, which is a foundational text of the Kabbalah, states that understand with wisdom and be wise with understanding. This suggests that wisdom and understanding have to work together, as we discussed, in ways that align with the divine. This transforms one from a person who simply speaks to a medaber chai, someone whose words are infused with life. Rambam also emphasizes this in his Guide for the Perplexed in 354, where he explains that intellectual achievement alone is insufficient for true human fulfillment. One must cultivate the intellect in service of God, meaning that the bina guides both thought and action towards divine goals. The transition from medaber to Israel involves discipline, which is essential to applying bina. Speech rooted in bina requires self-control, reflection, and alignment with Torah values. The Mishnah in Parkei Avot 2:5 teaches that in a place where there is no man, strive to be a man. This highlights the responsibility of using speech and intellect to uphold moral and spiritual principles. Only through the discipline of Binah can one use speech properly, ensuring that it reflects Torah wisdom rather than animalistic or basic selfish desires. Again, like we said, secular Judaism, which often separates the Jewish identity from Torah and divine wisdom, reduces the Jew to the state of medaber chai, or chai medaber, without the discipline of Binah and the structure of the Torah. We don't elevate ourselves towards this status of Israel. So, what we need to understand, Jews, is that we are doing things for a purpose. That purpose is to raise our level of consciousness and spiritual awareness, and to incorporate that learning, that understanding into the way that we live our life, so that we will achieve this. And when we do, we will be bridging the physical reality and the spiritual reality. And we know that there is another bridge between these two realities, and that is Jerusalem. And we know that there is a Tehileem that talks about this. I think it's 132. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But that psalm teaches us that the connection between this physical realm and the spiritual realm is Jerusalem. That's why we had the temple there, and why we will again have the temple once again, connecting the realms, the spiritual realm with the physical realm, and allowing for this light of God to shine into our reality. And that is the mission of us Jews, the nation of Israel. The reason for which we are a nation is to try to achieve this level of consciousness.